Hello, everyone. This is the 267th episode of Soccer Nostalgia Talk Podcast. As always, this is Sean from Los Angeles and the Soccer Nostalgia blog. For this episode, I welcome back Spanish author and historian Mr. Sergio Vilariño Ferreiro as we discuss Real Madrid in the 1985-86 season in the UEFA Cup. Mr. Villarreal is the author of México 70, 50 años de fútbol en color. Welcome back, Sergio.
Hi, Shahan. Thank you for having me once again.
I think it was maybe last year, maybe even 2 years ago, we discussed the 84-85 UEFA Cup triumph of Real Madrid.
Yeah.
So now we get into the next season, 85-86. So as this 85-86 season kicked off, what was the state of the affairs at Real Madrid following a crazy 84-85 season that saw the best and the worst of the team?
Well, I mean, the expectations at the club are always the same. We need to win, especially in the league. I mean, at this time, the league was the really important competition. It was a very long period without the title. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the longest since the arrival of Alfredo Di Stefano in 1953. So there was some sort of anxiety at the club. After several years of not being able to compete for the league title, some major disappointments because we had defeats in the European Cup final in 1981 against Liverpool and the Cup Winners' Cup final in 1983. For the first time in the whole decade, there was some sort of optimism in Concha Espina because the signings for this year were excellent. The squad had immense depth and a big effort was made to be able to compete even when the economic situation of the club was not great at the beginning of the decade, as we said in podcasts before.
To remind everyone, 1984-85 season had been the season where Emilio Butragueño was introduced to the European audience, and he was instrumental in the resurgence of Real Madrid in the UEFA Cup. And in fact, it was the beginning of the La Quinta del Buitre introduction at the European stage with Michel as well. Can you describe the manager, Luis Maloney, who had rescued the season at the tail end with the UEFA Cup and then even winning the League Cup?
Luis Molomni was the perfect man for the job at that moment. I mean, he was very well known for his playing years in the 50s. He was a very technical striker, and he was also known for his previous stints as a caretaker manager, right? It was an obvious and easy solution. The results proved it right. He was keen on a technical, passionate type of football, and Real Madrid fans liked it. The main task for Maloney was to get results while keeping the veterans happy and the young members of La Quinta del Buitre growing, right? It was not easy since Juanito Camacho and Santillana were still important members of the squad along with Gallego. Sanchez, Butragueño, and Mitchell were now automatic starters, while Martin Vázquez was more of a rotation player. And on top of that, he had Valdano, who played the best season of his career in this season 85-86, plus Maceda, Gordillo, and Hugo Sanchez, who were the new signings. And I think the only weak spot was in goal, right? Where Ocho Torrena started as the main man, but was not convincing enough. And he was really good at managing all of these type of players, type of egos, people who were in different stages of their careers. And that basically provoked a lot of optimism among the press and the fans.
It was the first full season of Ramon Mendoza as president. He was elected at the tail end of the 1984-85 season.
Mhm.
So, was that in itself a cause for optimism?
Yeah, I think so because only because of his personality, he looked like a very happy guy. He was very active. He had lots of energy. He became president after his two rivals for the elections, Eduardo Peña and Juanito Navarro, who was oddly like a humorist, a comedian, right? They withdraw from the race, and he immediately set off to reinforce the team and use the basis of that UEFA Cup champion squad to create a strong squad able to win the league and go deep in the European Cup because he was already thinking about the European Cup. He kept Molomni as the coach, as we said, and was working to bring top players to the club, right? Hugo Sanchez arrived from Atletico via Pumas Antonio Maceda right from Sporting de Gijón and Rafael Gordillo from Betis. They were known as La Quinta de los Machos, as the Mexican striker labeled them. And there were winds of change in Concha and obviously Ramon Mendoza was one of the main factors for this optimism that we are talking about.
And I remember at the time, this triple signing, at the time, it was very hyped. I mean, nowadays, we're used to like 20 players coming and going in a
Yeah.
transfer window. But at the time, these three top high level players being signed in this transfer window was a statement of purpose
Yeah.
that Real Madrid were ready to do business and start a new cycle.
Yeah, I think it's still one of the best transfer windows of the club history.
And of course, Maceda and Gordillo were national team players. And of course, Hugo
Yeah.
Sanchez was the Mexican national team striker and had been Pichichi the season before. And he'd been at Atletico Madrid for like 5 years now. And you just
Yeah.
mentioned how it was politically very difficult for Atletico Madrid to directly sell to
Yeah.
Real Madrid. So he had to be sold to UNAM. And then
Yes.
from UNAM, he was signed to Real Madrid.
Atletico's president would be basically killed if he sold the main star to their rival.
This transfer activity, I imagine, was very appetizing for fans. And you also have the arrival of Cholo from Zaragoza and
Mhm.
Francis from Valladolid. The players who leave include the German Uli Stielike. After 8 years, he joined Neuchâtel Xamax in Switzerland. More about that later. Miguel Pardeza, who was one of the La Quinta del Buitre players, he was loaned to Real Zaragoza. And of course, we know he will eventually become a Real Zaragoza legend.
Yeah.
Others like Frel and Francisco Pineda also joined Zaragoza. Isidro joined Santander. San Jose joined Cadiz. Paco Bonet left the club, and
Yeah.
Juan Lozano, the Belgian, he returned to Anderlecht
Yeah.
after two somewhat disappointing seasons. So there was a clear out, but very important arrivals.
Yeah, I think overall the transfer campaign was brilliant that summer. I mean, Hugo Sanchez, Gordillo, and Maceda were three of the best players of La Liga and three of the best available players for the club, and they were a major upgrade for key positions of the team. The biggest loss was Stilike because he was a main leader of the team, but his rivalry and bad relationship with Juanito was well known, and they'll see each other again in the games against Neuchâtel in the UEFA Cup, and it would not be pretty.
We already touched up on it, but let's discuss the backbone of the team. Like you said, as far as the goalkeepers, there was Ocho Torrena, but you still have on the books, you have Miguel Angel, you have Garcia Ramon, and even Agustin Rodriguez. So there's like four players at various stages of their career. But Ocho Torrena, who actually in 4 years he would be one of the three goalkeepers for the 1990 World Cup squad. At that point, he was at
Yes.
Valencia, I believe. But
Yes.
at this point, he's not the goalkeeper that I guess Real Madrid are looking for, perhaps for the future. And that's when Paco Bullo would come in the following season.
Yeah. I think he will start the season just because there's not enough money to bring a goalkeeper. And we have him, we have Agustin, who is still kind of young for a goalkeeper and he has experience. He played the European Cup final in 1981. And we also have Garcia Ramon, who is like really old, but is a legend of the club. So I think Molovny considered that with these three, let's say, profiles, he could have enough for this season, and then the club could go and try to sign let's say, a better or yeah, a better goalkeeper. Although, as you said, Ocho Torrena became international and went to the World Cup, something that Bullo never did.
And in defense, you still have Miguel Chendo, Porlan, of course, Sanchez, Camacho, Salguero, Maceda, Jesus Solana, of course. In midfield, you have Michel, Gallego, Gordillo, Rafael Martin Vázquez, of course. And of course, up front, it's one of the best strike forces in Europe. Butragueño, Valdano, Hugo Sanchez, not forgetting Santillana and Juanito still on the books.
Yeah, this mix of veterans who had a lot of experience, they've been in the club for more than 10 years, sometimes 15 years. Other members of the La Quinta del Buitre who are young, but already kind of established in the team. They had experience in Europe. And then we have these players that are coming up from Castilla, such as Solana, for example, who are joining these middle class, let's say, players like Chendo or Salguero, right? Chendo is going to be really important for the next 10 years, but they are going to be like the perfect complement to the big stars, let's say.
Real Madrid are in the UEFA Cup, and let's remind everyone, like you mentioned in the beginning, Real Madrid have not won the title since 1980. So that's an eternity for a team like Real Madrid.
Yeah.
So Real Madrid are competing in the UEFA Cup as defending champions. So in the first round, they face Greek side AEK Athens in September and October. And as is customary for Real Madrid of this era, they lose the away match 1-0, despite being such a more superior side, which is something I never understood. Real Madrid losing these matches. But of course, they destroy them in the return leg playing at Bernabeu 5-0. There's an own goal in the 5th minute.
Yeah.
Butragueño, Michel, Valdana all score in the first half, and Hugo Sanchez in the second half. And Real Madrid wins comfortably 5-0. They advance to the next round.
They kind of set the tone, right? They continue with the same tradition as the year before, like losing even against really weaker competition away. I don't know what happened in those trips, although we have an idea of what happened in Milan the year before with Juanito and the Señoritas and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, they are just able to lose against anybody, and they are able to suffer against anybody. And we are going to see it in this UEFA Cup much better than in the one before, because in the one before you can lose against Anderlecht because Anderlecht was one of the best teams in Europe. But here we're going to lose against AAK or even Neuchâtel, who are not top teams in Europe. Although we obviously know that at the Bernabeu, that was a different story.
So in the second round, they face the Soviet side, Chernomorets Odessa. So the first leg is on October 23rd at the Bernabeu, and Real Madrid wins 2-1. In fact, they score in the first minute through Gordillo, but Chernomorets tied the match early in the 8th minute, and Real Madrid have to wait until the 71st minute for Valdana to score the winner. So it's a narrow lead at home, which could be dangerous. However, in the return leg, surprisingly, Real Madrid don't lose and they come away with a scoreless tie and advance to the next round. So, all in all, this seems like one of the most difficult of Real Madrid's opponents, and you
Yeah.
would think it probably would be one of the more easy ones, but trips to the Soviet Union in those days were never that easy.
Yeah, this was such a scare. I mean, they proved that they were far more competitive than the previous round. Actually, Mendoza knew them because Mendoza was, I mean, he became rich because he had close ties with the Soviet
Oh yeah,
Union. He
horse
basically
trading, right?
managed. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and he knew that the tie was going to be difficult, but nobody basically took him seriously. But Chernomorets was a very well organized team, and that game of the Bernabeu was a scare. I mean, especially when Bagapov tied the game, because when Gordillo scored in the first minute, it was like, okay, this is going to be
Mhm.
a walk in the park. But that was really, really difficult. And then in the Central Stadium in Odessa, right, in November, they endure a tense and freezing encounter where the defense held firm to grind out a 0-0 draw and manage to advance. By the way, the day of the first leg against Chernomorets was very important for the club in terms of economy because the club collected 47 million pesetas, which is around $300,000 of that time, right? Out of a total gate potential of over 60 million pesetas, right? But more importantly, it secured the shirt sponsor because Madrid had a little problem with that. And Parmalat became the sponsor, apparently probably unconcerned about potential sale losses in Barcelona. But both the football and basketball team would wear the brand for 2 seasons. And I think the deal was worth around $1.5 million. And this represented one of the primary revenue streams intended to regain the investments Mendoza did during the summer because the club was not rich.
Yes, or like you said, the first half of the season, the team had no shirt sponsors.
Yeah.
I think the previous season there were Zanussi, if I'm not
Sanusi,
mistaken.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but then Parmalat would be in the second half of the season. Now we come to the third round,
That's a big
and
one.
yes, and this would be one of the most important matches of the La Quinta del Buitre era. So Real Madrid are facing the West German side, Borussia Mönchengladbach, managed by Jupp Heynckes, future Real Madrid manager.
Yeah.
Now, this is a decent, maybe not as strong as the 70 side, but nevertheless a decent side with a number of German internationals like Hans-Günther Bruns, Michael Fronczek, Wilfried Hannes, Ewald Linen, Frank Mill, Uwe Rahn, among others.
Yeah.
So the first leg is actually played at Dusseldorf. So for this match on November 27th, Borussia Mönchengladbach wins 5-1. So they score in the 36th minute through Frank Mill. There's an own goal by Salguero. So Uwe Rahn's cross from the left was deflected by Salguero into his own net. Early in the second half, Uwe Rahn scores the third goal. He follows that up 4 minutes later and scores his second goal, Uwe Rahn, as his second goal in the 59th minute. So within the hour, Borussia Mönchengladbach is already leading 4-0. 10 minutes later, Rafael Gordillo pulls an important goal back when he knocks in Chendo's cross from the right. And this will be a
Yes.
very crucial goal. Even though Borussia Mönchengladbach scores a fifth goal in the 85th minute through Ewald Linen, Gordillo also is sent off near the end. So it's a 5-1 win for Borussia Mönchengladbach. And at this point, it looks like Real Madrid are dead and buried. But some people aren't forgetting that they were in the same exact position the previous year against Anderlecht. They have to play the second leg against Mönchengladbach with that Rafael Gordillo suspended. So this return leg is on December 11th at the Bernabeu, and it's one of the most important nights for the club's history. Real Madrid wins this match 4-0. Jorge Valdano scores twice within the first 20 minutes, both of them set up by Juanito. And in the second half, in the 77th minute, Santiana scores the third. And 2 minutes before
Fourth
the
one.
end, Santiana again scores the crucial fourth goal. And Real Madrid miraculously qualify with the away goals rule. And again, let's remember in the previous season, Real Madrid had performed the remontada against Anderlecht, losing 3-0 the first leg and winning 6-1 the second leg. That had served as a reference point. Now, was this remontada against Mönchengladbach? Was it an even more important one? Certainly the most important one for the La Quinta del Buitre era. And of course, there's that famous celebration by Juanito upon his substitution.
Yeah, I mean, regarding the second leg against Mönchengladbach, I mean, that game proved the importance that veterans such as Juanito and Santillana still had on the team. They were basically the leaders of the team. And these remontadas, as you said, became kind of a synonym with those 2 years in the UEFA Cup, right? The Borussia game is probably the most famous of all, along with the Anderlecht one from the year before. One thing that we need to have in mind, and we kind of already touched on this before, is that Real Madrid suffered a lot when they played abroad, right? Every time they traveled to Europe, or especially Northern Europe, there was a strong possibility of them being crushed. But as a lot of players confirmed, that same team that were heavily beaten by Anderlecht, Mönchengladbach, Inter in several occasions. As soon as that happened, the veterans started talking about remontada, right? Butragueño always says that when he was going back to the dressing room after losing 5-1 in Mönchengladbach or in Düsseldorf in this case, right? He heard people yelling and shouting and he thought that there was a fight somewhere. And when he arrived to the dressing room, there was no fight. It was Camacho and Juanito just yelling that they were going to destroy the Germans in Madrid. And he always talks about that during those 15 days till the return leg, they were on top of every player, telling them to bring their A game for that match. They were ringing their teammates at random times just to yell at them and telling them that they're going to kill the Germans and basically to challenge the youngsters to show how good they were. So when the day came, 100,000 wild Madridistas in the stands, and the scenario was set. I mean, it's really weird to think about this now because the Bernabeu is basically a theater now. But, at certain moments in the European Cup, the stadium comes alive, right? And Real Madrid went out with a very offensive 11 and attacked for the entirety of the game, and they crushed the Germans. And as you said, the most famous image of this game is Juanito after a great game on his side, right? Coming out of the field after completing the remontada, jumping, full of joy, fist in the air, looking just like another fan, right? And this has become one of the most iconic images of this generation. And that was basically the spirit of the team, the espíritu de Juanito that we talked about it every day.
As we discussed previously, in the previous season, Emilio Butragueño was one of the discoveries in the European stage. And he was continuing to shine along with the new international Michel, who was capped towards the end of that year, 1985. And Manuel Sanchez was not far behind. He would be capped in the following year, in 1986. What was their status at this point, and how were they perceived by the larger European press?
Yeah, this year was the confirmation of their talent. I mean, they play a lot, and Butragueño, Sanchez, and Mitchell became automatic starters and fan favorites. I mean, they were lads from Madrid, and that created that extra connection with the fans. I think this is the season when La Quinta takes over the team. I mean, before they were good, but they were secondary actors for the veterans. But this season they became the main stars, and they did it playing good at attacking football and winning La Liga after 5 years. And also it was their confirmation at an international level for some of them, especially Butragueño and Mitchell, who were going to travel with the national team to Mexico for the World Cup. And in the case of El Buitre, he was already considered a wonder kid, right? And received the Bravo Trophy for 2 years in a row. That would be like receiving the Copa Trophy nowadays. So I think that's a proof of their European status.
And let's not forget that though he was not part of the La Quinta del Buitre Chendo, he was also capped this season. He became an
Yes.
important player this season as
Yeah,
well.
I think Chendo and Bullo are like kind of the ones who are not members of La Quinta, but they are very related with that group of players.
So, in contrast to that previous season, 84-85, Real Madrid were shining at home and in Europe. Was this due to the self confidence from the UEFA Cup from the previous season, or was it the input of Sanchez, Maceda, and Gordillo?
I think both. I mean, it's obvious that Sanchez, Maceda, and Gordillo just added like that extra level of quality to the squad. Real Madrid started the season in an impressive fashion. They were taking advantage of Barcelona's poor start. The connection between like the new players and the old ones were really, really quick. The squad was deep and full of talent, and Molomny was the perfect man to manage all those egos and different necessities. And if I'm not mistaken, Real Madrid suffers its first loss of the season in November against Barcelona, but Madrid just pulled away in December and were in trouble from then on, with Barcelona kind of dropping points regularly. They won the league on match day 30, which is with 4 games to play, right? With record number of points, 56, 11-point lead on Barcelona. And this was a league with 2 points for a win. So that's an enormous gap. They won 26 out of 34 matches. So it was one of the most comfortable league title wins for the club. I mean, the team was really good. played some impressive football at the beginning of the season. The results were short and they suffered, especially away from home. But when 1986 came, they were already the best team in the country by far, and it was fairly easy victory.
In the spring of 1986, for the quarterfinals, Real Madrid were to face a suicide Neuchâtel Xamax with former star Uli Stielike. As you mentioned, was it well known that he and Juanito were at odds, and how was his reception by the fans?
Yes, it was known. It was actually because of him probably leaving. Like he was not comfortable anymore. His contract was up, and he did chose to go to a obviously less competitive league because he was already also a veteran. But the issues with Juanito were well known. Silky was one of the most beloved players of the last decade among Madrid fans. I mean, they love the way he fought for the team and the way he was ready to sacrifice himself to get the results, and which, by the way, are the characteristics that make Juanito also adored. I mean, I think that although they were really good players, they symbolize a mediocre period for the club, to be honest. But when the club doesn't win as much as expected, the fans at least demand the players to fight for the crest, and those two just did that in every game. So that's why they are especially loved by the Bernabeu.
For this quarterfinals in March 86, the first leg is at the Bernabeu. This match, Madrid will win 3-0. Actually, Agustin started in the goal, but I think he may have been injured, and in the first half, he was replaced by Ocho Torrena.
Agustin was a really fragile goalkeeper. He was really tall, really lanky, and I kind of remember 3 or 4 occasions where he is not able to complete a match, including one while he was playing in Tenerife, one of those leagues that were lost in the 90s.
So this match on March 5th, so Real Madrid will win 3-0. Sanchez scored in the first half, and then Michel in the 68th minute and Butragueño in the 85th minute scored the other goal. So Real Madrid wins 3-0. We have to mention that Neuchâtel's Robert Luti also scores a goal, but that was ruled out. It looks like they're not going to be much of a threat, but there's a second leg away from home 2 weeks later. And of course, Real Madrid have to lose. And who scores the first goal for Neuchâtel? But Ishtilike. They scored the second goal right at the end and they win 2-0. Not sure if they gave Real Madrid a scare, but because the second goal was really near the
Really,
end.
yeah, really, really late.
But Real Madrid are still losing against much inferior teams away from home. Yeah.
Shocking performance, to be honest. Another one, right? And on top of that, it seems, as you said, he still like, scores the first goal, and that basically made the tension just grew, right? It was a very tense match, especially in between Juanito and Stilike. At a certain moment, they became embroiled in a heated argument on the pitch, and basically in a moment of pure fury, Juanito famously spat at Stilik, and the image of the spit became a scandal in European football. To be honest, it was kind of a shocking display of respect between two players who had shared so many battles, right, in the white shirt. I mean, despite the ugliness of the act, the story ended with a reconciliation, like always, right? Juanito, before his tragic death in 1992, expressed deep regret for the incidents. We know how Juanito was, right? And Stilik eventually spoke of Juanito with great affection, and acknowledging that their competitive spirits simply boiled over that night. But this was just another example of what they call the dark side of La Quinta del Buitre era, right? A period defined by incredible talent, but also by an aggressive, win at all cost attitude that occasionally crossed the line, especially by the veteran members of the squad, not as much as by the actual members of La Quinta, who were sometimes even accused of lacking that killer instinct. But I think we remember what Juanito did to Mataos a little bit
Oh yeah,
later,
a year later. Yes,
a
yes.
year later. So Chendo was always in the middle of these type of issues. Camacho was known for their fierce attitude. So yeah, that dark side existed. That's obvious.
In the semifinals, Real Madrid were once again drawn against the Italian side Inter. Now, did most fans think it was advantageous since they had eliminated the same side in 1981, 1983, and in the previous season, 1985, or was there caution?
Always caution, but also optimism because of those recent victories and because there was a feeling that this team was much better than those Real Madrid iterations that had already beaten Inter.
This is an Inter, just like the previous season, had maintained the same backbone. You have Walter Zenga in goal, Bergomi, Giuseppe Baresi, Ferri. Tardelli had joined that season, Marco
Yeah,
Tardelli. You still have Altobelli, the Irishman Liam Brady, and of course Karl-Heinz Rummenigge, the captain of West Germany, for the side managed by Mario Corso. So just as strong a side as the previous season. And just like the previous season, the first leg was at San Siro. First leg was on April the 2nd. As early as the first minute, Marco Tardelli scored for Inter.
yeah,
He doubled the lead, Tardelli, in the 54th minute. Again, near the end, in the 87th minute, Jorge Valdano pulled an important goal back, a crucial away goal. Even though a couple of minutes later, Salguero accidentally lobbed the ball back into his own net to give Inter a 3-1 lead. Just like the previous season, Inter had won, but it was a crucial away goal. I'm sure going into the second leg after what had happened the previous year, I'm sure probably Real Madrid were confident to win at least 2-0. So this would be another classic remontada, the second leg on April 16th at Bernabeu. Hugo Sanchez scored a penalty kick just before halftime. Gordillo scores a second goal in the 63rd minute, but Inter put a goal back through penalty kick through Liam Brady just a
Brady.
couple of
Yeah.
minutes later. But Hugo Sanchez scores again from a penalty spot in the 74th
Mhm.
minute. And the match ends in 3-1 in regulation and has to go to overtime.
Yeah.
And of course, in the overtime, Real Madrid always had the momentum. In the 94th minute, Carlos Santana heads in the decisive fourth goal. He scores again in 107th minute. Real Madrid win 5-1. And we should mention that for the Italians, Mandorlini was also sent off in 102nd minute. Another classic remontada by Real Madrid. Just like the previous year, this was yet another remontada. So, how was this particular one viewed historically compared to the previous year's one against Inter?
I think this one kind of stands as another ultimate testament. All of these are like ultimate testaments of the Bernabeu spirit, right? Like centered on the myth of the impossible comeback, right? As you said, the defeat in San Siro 3-1 was very demoralizing because with Valdano scoring almost at the end of the game, that gave a glimpse of hope, right? 87 minutes, something like that. But then just after that, the own goal by Salguero kind of destroyed that effort. But in the return leg, right, Hugo Sanchez and Santillana kind of rose the bar, right? Santillana with his aerial prowess and in clinical finishing, right? They kind of dismantled the Italian defense, and Mitchell and Butragueño kind of orchestrated the attack. On the other side, as you said, Inter relied on Rummenigge and Brady, but I think they kind of lived a nightmare, right? As they watched their team crumble, right? Under the miedo escenico, right? The stage fright that Valdano once said that a lot of teams suffered when they went into the Bernabeu, right? Because those nights, the Bernabeu or Madrid, they had like there was like a feverish atmosphere, right? Hugo Sanchez scored two penalties. Gordillo added the second goal to tie the match, and then Santillana was the man of the game in the extra time, right? This tie also solidified the legend of Juanito, who the year before famously warned Inter's players, right, in broken Italian that 90 minuti al Bernabeu sono molto longo, which is terrible Italian, but that basically 90 minutes at the Bernabeu are really long, right? And this was a prophecy that came true once again in 1986.
Just like the previous year against the Hungarian side Videoton, I imagine by this time For the final against the West German side, Köln, many assumed Real would win, especially after the remontadas against all the top sides we mentioned. Plus, they were now Spanish League champions as well. Was that the feeling?
Yeah, there was a lot of confidence in the team before the final. Although Cole was a very strong side, they were full of past international and future internationals. They had a really good team. But once again, the Bernabeu created a magical atmosphere, and the team was a steamroller after the first goal from Alofs.
Again, this Köln side, we have to mention we have Harald Schumacher in goal. Other familiar names include Uwe Bein, a young Thomas Hessler, Pierre Litbarski, and Klaus Allofs. Yeah, so the first leg at Bernabeu is on April 30th. Klaus Allofs gave Köln the lead, but after that, it was all Real Madrid. And before halftime, in the 38th minute, Hugo Sanchez had tied the match. And in the 42nd minute, Rafael Gordillo had headed in the second goal from Juanito's free kick. And early in the second half, in the 51st minute, Valdano scored his first goal. And near the end, in the 84th minute, Valdano robbed the ball in the box and scored his second goal, Real Madrid's fourth. And just before the end, in the 89th
Yeah.
minute, Santiana scored a fifth, and it was as good as over for Cole. But of course, the second leg played at West Berlin on May 6th. Of course, Real Madrid had to lose, and they lose 2-0. Uwe Bein scores in the first half, and Ralph Geilenkirchen scores the second goal in the second half. But I don't think Real Madrid were particularly troubled. They won their second consecutive UEFA Cup, and actually they became the first team to do that at
Yeah.
the time. Yeah.
Correct. I mean, the key game was the Bernabeu game, like always, right? And I think everybody just probably realized by this time, right, if they are listening to the podcast, that Gordillo's season is unbelievable at this moment, and that's why I don't understand how he didn't play a lot in the World Cup in Mexico. That's a podcast that we already did.
Mhm.
Yeah, 5-1, and it was just a matter of managing the advantage in Germany. I mean, these two victories in Europe plus the winning campaign in the league just put a lot of pressure on the team's shoulders for the years to come. I mean, there was a message, a very clear message from the fans and the board. You must win the seventh European Cup. That's it. That's the obsession at this moment.
Was this business as usual? Were celebrations more muted compared to the previous season in the UEFA Cup?
Not really. I mean, winning in Europe was something that a full generation of Madridistas had lived, and the two UEFA Cups plus the league title were soundly celebrated. And that festive atmosphere would continue during the summer, just using the exploits of El Buitre during the World Cup to keep enjoying the rebirth of Real Madrid as an international force. This is when the famous celebrations, La Cibeles, start during the World Cup. It's just a continuation of this amazing year of football by the club.
And as you mentioned, after this triumph, after also winning the league title, now Real Madrid had gained entry to the Champions Cup, and clearly the focus was shifted, like you said, in winning the seventh.
Yes, as I said before, this squad was built to make a deep run in the European Cup. And after winning the league and the UEFA Cup, the confidence and the message for the team was very clear. But unlike today, you could not focus only on the European Cup alone, because if you fell short, you needed the league victory to have another crack at the European crown. So this squad was kept a long and deep one to be able to be competitive on both fields, Spain and Europe.
Was this also the last season that veterans like Juanito and Santiana were still effective?
I mean, both were like kind of the spiritual leaders of the team, along with Camacho, right? Their play time was reduced as they became rotation players, but they were very important during the whole season, and especially in the European campaign, like leading the team through the remontadas. Santillana was a backup for Hugo, Butragueño, and Valdano. Juanito played mostly as an attacking midfielder. He used to be a winger. He usually kept Martin Vázquez on the bench, but I think they still had football to offer to the team as they kept play in the next seasons, a couple of seasons at least for Santillana. We know what happens with Juanito next year.
In retrospect, the transfer activity could not have paid better dividends, though unfortunately Maceda would be injured at Mexico in the World Cup, and that precipitated the end for him that we discussed in our Spain 85-86 season
Mhm.
podcast. So,
Yes.
what was his impact in his one and only complete season for Real Madrid?
All right. So, I mean, regarding La Quinta de los Machos, Hugo and Gordillo, as we saw, they were ace signings, right? The Spanish was a difference maker from the left, but the Mexican was something else. I mean, everything he touched was turned into a goal. And although his character didn't match that well inside the dressing room, his teammates could not live without his striking prowess. So he was a fantastic player, excellent signing, and a lone serving one also. In the case of Maceda, he arrived as one of Europe's best liberos, and his presence at the back allowed Sanchez to flourish. Maceda was tactically excellent, and when he got injured in Mexico, he left huge gap in the team. The club tried to replace him with several signings, such as Mino or Tendillo, or moving Gallego, apparently as libero, but none of them could offer what Maceda added to the team. And I think it was not till the arrival of Fernando Hierro and his redeployment as center back that Real Madrid actually found a substitute for Maceda. He was that brilliant.
Real Madrid chose to replace its winning manager Luis Moloni with the Dutchman Leo Ben Hacker for the following season. Was this because the hierarchy felt they needed a foreign manager for the Champions Cup?
I think it was more related with the fact that Molomni was always considered an interim coach. In Spain, we call them firefighters, and there was no fire to fight right now. I mean, the club was in a good position. I mean, he was perfect to develop La Quinta into the main players of the squad while managing the egos of the veterans. But now that Butragueño and his gang were the main guys, Molomni's job was done. I mean, so the appointment of Ben Acker, who was famous for his offensive style of play, was well received. He was a great coach for them, willing to unleash their potential, giving them the freedom to attack, to exchange positions, to feel comfortable on the field. I mean, that summer also there were some rumors about the club trying to sign a British manager. There was rumors about Toshak or Howard Kendall, but I don't think the team fit the British mold. So in the end, I think Ben Hacker was perfect. I mean, he was the ideal coach for this squad for La Quinta.
In closing, was this season in a way a bridge for the La Quinta del Buitre era to be a force in the Champions Cup and, of course, five straight league titles?
Yeah, this was a very important season because, as you said, Shahan, it marked the transition for La Quinta. I mean, in the previous season, they had established themselves as first team players, but it is when they became its fundamental pieces. And in the case of Butragueño and Mitchell, like the team's major stars alongside Hugo Sanchez and Gordillo. I mean, this represented a natural transition for the veteran figures who had previously led the team, Camacho, Gallego, Santillana, Juanito, and they went into a supporting role back in the youth and the star signed by the club. It was a change of an era, and I think a step up in level. We were coming from a Madrid in decline, which struggled to compete for European titles and wasn't winning the league. And now it was rejuvenated Madrid that had proven it could win in international competitions and was establishing itself as the best team in Spain for the next 5 years.
With that, I would like to thank you for your participation in this interview. All our respective contact information is listed on a blog and podcast uploads. So, Sergio, thank you once again and hope to continue these discussions on football history.
My pleasure as always. Thank you very much.
Thank you.